In some decades, soccer wasn't a game, but a fight for survival. Stadiums shook, referees were drowned out by the noise, careers crumbled overnight. One wrong pass could end everything, and for some players, their own country suddenly became the greatest danger of their career. These are seven soccer players who had to flee to survive, and now the story of the first name begins. Top 1. Ferenc Puskás. Ferenc Puskás was already a force of nature long before his name divided Europe. Goals and streaks, titles with Honved, a left foot that tore apart entire defenses, shots fired as if from close range, even when the penalty area was crowded. He led Hungary through games that resembled explosions more than classic encounters, forcing defenders to instinctively retreat even before he touched the ball. But at the peak of this dominance, the system around him disintegrated. As Hungary politically imploded, soccer became a trap, borders closed, careers were frozen, and Puskás's future suddenly no longer depended on form, but on passes, permits, and overnight decisions. He chose a radical break, left his country in chaos, lost years, weight, rhythm, and reappeared in Spain, where he was considered finished. At Real Madrid, he turned doubts into numbers, scored goals from angles that modern tracking data still classify as irrational, and proved that game intelligence can replace raw speed. Today, stadiums bear his name, trophies commemorate his left foot's mark, and his image lives on every time fans talk about impossible finishes. Ferenc Puskás didn't leave his country out of fear of the game, but to prevent his talent from disappearing into history. Top 2. György Hagi dominated games with numbers unusual for a playmaker of his time. Goals from distance, assists from impossible spaces, responsibility in every attack. At Steaua Bucharest, he led his team through European nights where the ball moved faster than defenders could think. His left foot wasn't an option, it was a threat, and opposing coaches built entire systems just to stop him. But as his importance on the field grew, his environment became tighter. Romania was a closed system, transfers were controlled, decisions politically filtered, and every career was under scrutiny. Hagi played at a world-class level, but without the freedom that level demanded. The move abroad wasn't a luxury in his career, but a liberation. In Spain and later in Italy, his game exploded into new dimensions, shots with barely measurable run-ups, passes through lines that, according to modern positional data, shouldn't even exist, a game vision years ahead of its time. Today, Hagi no longer appears in the noise of the big leagues, but in the quiet light of academies, stadiums, and stands, where his name evokes respect, not nostalgia. György Hagi was proof that sometimes a player has to leave a country for his game to finally breathe. Top 3. Alfredo Di Stefano. Alfredo Di Stefano wasn't a specialist, he was an entire system. Goals, assists, runs across the entire field. Titles and series, his statistics already defied any clear role description back then. He dropped back, initiated attacks, reappeared in the penalty area, and decided games as if he were controlling them from the outside. But his career wasn't linear. It ran through chaos. In South America, soccer sank into political conflicts, strikes, parallel leagues, and power struggles where contracts lost their value. Di Stefano found himself caught between fronts, playing in one country, registered in another, becoming a pawn in a system that guaranteed no future. The path to Europe wasn't a planned ascent, but an escape from instability. At Real Madrid, he transformed this unrest into total control. Modern analyses show that his running distances, positional changes, and decision-making times would be extreme even by today's standards. He played faster because he thought earlier, gaining time where others lost it. Today, his name stands for an era that cannot be reconstructed, but only remembered. White jerseys, soft light, a presence that ordered everything. Alfredo Di Stefano didn't leave his environment to become greater. He left it to have a future at all. Top 4. Carlos Tevez. Carlos Tevez played soccer with the force of a concrete storm. Goals from close range, physical commitment without backing down, runs that physically dismantled defenders. In Argentina, he quickly became the last stop for every attack, a striker who didn't ask for space but took it. His numbers grew, his presence dominated games. But the environment was a cage. Club structures collapsed, violence crept closer to daily life, and every season felt like a balancing act between career and survival. It became clear to Tevez that talent alone wasn't enough when the system around you collapsed. The move to Europe wasn't a dream but a necessity. In England and later in Italy, he transformed raw energy into efficiency, pressed with intensities that modern tracking systems today classify as extreme, scored goals under constant contact, and forced defensive lines to drop deeper than their tactics allowed. Today, Tevez no longer appears at the center of the noise, but on the sidelines as a coach, observer, a symbol of a generation that had to fight for its place. Carlos Tevez didn't leave his homeland to seek fame. He left because stagnation would have meant the end for him. Top 5. Hristo Stoichkov. Hristo Stoichkov didn't play, he detonated. Goals with force, reckless dribbling, titles with CSKA Sofia, and later numbers that suddenly caused alarm in Europe. He wasn't a striker who waited, but one who destroyed spaces, forced shots, and emotionally tilted games. Every action carried risk, every touch of the ball, tension. But in Bulgaria, his temperament became a limit. A rigid system, tight control, little room for a character who had to explode to function. Stagnation would have broken him. The move to Spain wasn't a career move, but an escape from an environment that couldn't contain his energy. At FC Barcelona, Stoichkov transformed chaos into precision, combined aggressiveness with efficiency, and produced shooting angles that even today's shot maps would classify as extreme. He played faster than the order around him and forced entire defensive chains to adapt to his unpredictability. Today, he stands not in the shadows, but in the bright light of studios, stands, and memories, his voice as sharp as his stride once was. Risto Stoichkov left his country because his game needed space, and space is only found by those who leave borders behind. Top 6. George Weah. George Weah didn't come from a system, he came from nothing. Goals with raw power, sprints from deep zones, shots at full speed, numbers that suddenly appeared in European competitions without anyone being prepared. At Monaco, Paris, and later in Italy, he dismantled defenses with runs that modern tracking data would mark as the boundary between speed and control. But behind this explosion was a country of origin that offered him no protection. Liberia sank into chaos, instability devoured every prospect, and a return meant stagnation, if not worse. For Weah, Europe wasn't a career step, but an escape. He played with the urgency of a man who knew there was no turning back, won duels in open space, created goals from situations that statistically should hardly exist, and bore responsibility without security. Today, his name is bigger than any club, a face between politics, history, and stadium lights, often alone, often silent. George Weah didn't leave his homeland to become something. He left it not to be lost. Top 7. Diego Maradona. Diego Maradona was already a global event before the pressure began to crush him. Goals, assists, ball contacts that neutralized entire systems, World Cup, club football, games that revolved solely around his movements. His numbers explained greatness, but not the burden. In Argentina, every game became a national affair, every mistake a headline, every appearance a trial. Soccer stopped being a space and became a tribunal. Maradona felt that his own country could no longer support him because expectation and control took all the air. The move to Europe, to Naples, wasn't a classic transfer, but an internal exodus. There he transformed pressure into control, dominated games with ball handling that modern data would describe as extremely energy efficient, gained time against multiple opponents, and decided matches where the statistics actually spoke against him. Today, Maradona is no longer an active part of the game, but a projection. Murals, chants, flickering images on screens, a figure between myth and warning. Diego Maradona didn't leave his homeland because he didn't love it, but because it had become too heavy to breathe in. The football of this generation was raw, loud, and ruthless. Some careers were not decided by form, but by the courage to leave a place before it took everything. If you want to discover more of these stories, join us on this journey through the shadows and lights of past eras and remain a part of Era Legends. That was a time when football knew no security. Talents had to make decisions before systems crushed them. Some victories didn't begin in the stadium, but at airports, border crossings, and silent nights. If these stories captivate you, then stay tuned. Support this project with a subscription, a like, and your opinion in the comments, because some legends are only understood when you follow them to the end.